real pleasure to be here this evening on behalf of the 45,000 members of Chicago Midwest Regional Joint Board of United here in the 8 states of the Upper Midwest. I'm very proud to say that we've been on record in opposition to this war since before George Bush thought of it. We polled our membership when the war started to see what their attitude was towards the president, if they would support us in opposing this war. And our membership was divided. Half of them thought George Bush couldn't tell the truth, and the other half thought he was a liar. So that was enough consensus to move ahead. But I'm going to keep my remarks very brief here. My pleasure is to introduce the president of our union, Unite Here, John Wilhelm. But let me tell you that John is someone who has spent his entire career doing the tough, hard work of our generation, my generation of trade union leaders, which was starting with organizations that were inept, did not have a progressive vision, on their best days couldn't put 2 and 2 together and get 4. And we've struggled for decades now, and John has led that struggle to turn what was a polite way, moribund is the polite word, but bullshit is the real word, trade union movement into the fighting force that we can become now. And we've spent our lives doing that, and this is our moment. John Wilhelm is a leader to lead us through the next phase of the development of the trade union movement. So John has been a champion of civil rights in the trade union movement. He's been a champion of particularly the rights of immigrant workers. The Immigrant Workers' Freedom March was born inside John's head and then became the expansive movement that it did become by his recruitment and organizing of tens of thousands of other leaders across the country. And it is my pleasure to introduce someone who's been an adamant opponent to this war and its predecessors for his entire career, my president, our friend, our leader, John Wilhelm.
Much. You know, we talk about manufacturing jobs in this country like somehow God ordained that they were good jobs as we tell them goodbye to those jobs. He didn't ordain that they were good jobs. He put the spirit in the workers who made them good jobs by organizing them. And it is a crime. It is a crime that those jobs are being exported not in search of improved conditions for the workers in those other countries, but in search of the relentless race to the global bottom. It is, in fact, our solemn duty to oppose this war. It is, as it always is, the sons and daughters of working people, the sons and daughters of union members, and the sons and daughters of people who would like to be in unions and aren't yet. It is, as it always is, when capital decides to fight a war, it is they who pay the price, and it is in particular, as Viola said, people of color, immigrants, the children of immigrants. How shameful can it possibly be in this country that we want to continue to exclude African Americans from the bounty of this country, and yet we want to send them to a rotten, lying, shameful war and get them killed and maimed and crippled? It is a shameful thing. And how shameful is it that we welcome workers from all over the world here to do the work that needs to be done, and our companies hope they'll do it as cheaply as possible, of course. And then we take them and their sons and their daughters and we send them to that rotten, shameful, lying war. It's a shameful thing. In this country, it's not different from previous wars. And Noel mentioned that he and I and others of a certain age also opposed one of the many earlier misadventures of this country in foreign lands, the Vietnam War. Let's make sure, sisters and brothers, let's make sure that in this war we do not repeat the mistake that the Vietnam anti-war movement made, a terrible mistake. We need to embrace those soldiers, not criticize them. in this game. Many of them are driven to the military because they don't have other options. Many of them signed up to be part-time soldiers and found out they were full-time soldiers. Many of them have been over there for not just one tour, but 2 and 3 and 4. And they are victims, not perpetrators. So let's make sure that we embrace them while they're there and after they get back. And let's not permit this country, to do once again with these veterans what this country shamefully did to the veterans of Vietnam. You know, you can read different studies, and some of them say 1 in 3, and some of them say 50%, but some very large percentage of the homeless people on the streets of this country are veterans, and most of them are Vietnam veterans. We sent them over there, we screwed them up, and we leave them on the streets of this country. We cannot, sisters and brothers, permit that to happen again with a new generation of veterans. And that's a particular danger because our military has made great strides in battlefield medicine. And so, soldiers that might have died in a previous war are being kept alive, but that means they're coming back with injuries far worse than the kinds of injuries that previous generations of veterans had. And there's already data to show that post-traumatic stress syndrome in Iraq veterans and Afghanistan veterans is probably worse even than it was in Vietnam veterans. And at the same time, of course, we are crippling the Veterans Administration healthcare system, which is supposed to take care of them. That's compounding crime with crime, and we cannot permit this country to do that. We have to demand, as human beings, as citizens, and as union members, that these veterans be taken care of when they get here. Now, we can be glad, as Fred and others have said, that the American people demonstrated in the voting booth last month that they have the capability to cut through all of the nonsense in the media and to send a message. And that's a good thing, and a lot of the work that USLAW and others have done is responsible for that. But I think all of us know that we have to be just as vigilant and more vigilant, really. The Iraq war is not over, even though the American people clearly said that it needs to be over. The President of the United States says, stay the course, even though the American people said it's time for this war to be over. And truthfully, sisters and brothers, because of this war, the world is a more dangerous place than it was before we invaded Iraq. It's a more dangerous place than it was, and so more things are likely to happen.
That's right.
And this administration will seize upon things that happen in this more dangerous world as their excuse for the next misadventure. There is no evidence that this administration and the corporations which put it there and keep it there have learned anything at all. There is no evidence that they are deterred. And so we need to look, for example, to Iran, which will be possibly the next excuse to increase what they're doing. And I know that some people would like to say, no, that's not possible. The American people spoke. But I think most of us would agree that, sadly, that's more than possible. What about Iran, after all? The CIA coup that installed the despotic regime of the Shah of Iran in the early 1950s is arguably the root of all of this that we're dealing with today. Arguably, we started that.
That's right.
The British colonial empire finally was defeated, and we decided to take its place in places like Iran and Iraq. And oil, of course, is the root of all of this. I think we all know that. You know, they ran up the gas prices, then they said, wait a minute, we got to re-elect these people, let's run them down for a little while. Well, they're going back up, sisters and brothers. Gas prices will be back. So, in short, if we don't redouble our efforts, Iran will be next, and Iraq will not be a place that we get out of. And I, like you, am pleased with the results of the recent elections, primarily because the Democrats on the average are better than the other people on the average. And in Ohio, you've had the wisdom to elect and re-elect some people who are genuinely progressive Democrats. Sherrod Brown and Dennis Kucinich. Let's be honest about it. Aside from some Democrats like the two I just named, the people in this room, and indeed ultimately the American people, are probably going to be disappointed in a lot of the Democrats. Now again, they're better than the other people on the average. But this is a time not to rest and to relax in the notion that, yeah, well, the message got sent because we all worked so hard, we all did. And the message did get sent, but the message is not only not heard by the Bush administration, it is not only not heard by the corporations that put the Bush administration where it is not yet heard by enough Democratic elected officials, and so we have to redouble our efforts. We have to make sure that whoever is in office, whatever letter they have after their name, whatever their future aspirations are, we have to make sure that the message the American people sent is heard and acted upon by them. We can't let people off the hook because they might be Democrats. We can't let people off the hook because we might have supported them. We can't let people off the hook because they might be good on something else. We have to tell the people that are in Washington and the people that are in every elected office in this country, little town, to state capital, to Washington, D.C., we have to tell them that this is a shameful thing. It's a criminal thing. It is making the world a more dangerous place. It is slaughtering the sons and daughters of workers in America and slaughtering in much greater quantity the people of Iraq. It is a thing that we not only have to stop doing in Iraq, we have to prevent it in the next place and the next place after that. So